Good evening and welcome everybody to Gilda's Club's Basic Budgeting. We're so happy to do this in partnership with Mazuma and have Rachel Marshall here with us this evening. So I'm going to pass it on to Rachel now, and we are so happy to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita. And I am so happy. I was just telling Anita how much I love doing this sort of thing. I love financially empowering people. I love talking about budgeting and different financial topics. So when I learned of the chance to do this tonight, I was like so excited. I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. So I appreciate those of you who are here and jumping on. And for those of you that are maybe just watching this after the fact and you're watching this recording, I just want to say thank you. And I'll go ahead and get started. So I have a presentation here that I'll share. And I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. Okay, so we are talking about creating a budget in 2022, which, can look a little different for everyone, just kind of depending on, the circumstances and everything that we've all been going through the last couple of years with the pandemic. So we'll just kind of go over this, and budgeting, it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be, dirty word for anybody. Like it's actually can be really fun because it's really, you are taking back control of your finances. Sometimes we find that, our money's going places and we don't know where. And you want to be the one controlling that. So we'll just kind of briefly talk about that. So as you kind of hear the word budget at this point in the presentation, I would like you to just kind of think of some words to yourself that maybe come to mind when you hear the word budget. Earlier today, when I did this same presentation on budgeting, some of the words that people came up with for what they thought of when they thought of a budget was eek. That was one really interesting. Restrictive, scary, so all this other stuff. So I'm just kind of here to guide you and show you that it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm going to go to the next here, and we'll just talk about really just some very basic steps. You might already be budgeting. You might already know kind of what your income is and what you have coming in, but there's really just some very basic ways to start figuring out your money, figuring out your budget. And one of the first things that you want to do is you want to establish guidelines for yourself, and you want to try to stick to those guidelines. So, when you're thinking of your budget and you're thinking of where all your money is going, really try to create an outline for, okay, I'm going to let my money go here, and I'm maybe not going to let it go to this other thing. Like for me, for instance, I'm crazy about plants. So I try to create guidelines and make sure I don't maybe spend too much money on plants. Another really important thing to starting your budget, you want to think of all your expenses, and that's everything from gas for your car to your phone bill to your rent, your mortgage, anything where money is regularly going out, even those miscellaneous expenses. Like if you really like Starbucks or you frequently go to Taco Bell or something, put that in there. That's an expense that you want to account for. You also want to factor your income as well. Income can be your salary. It can be a side gig, like if you Grubhub or do DoorDash or something. It's tips. If you're in service or something like that, you want to make sure that you know your tips. It's also, maybe you have disability or something like that. You want to factor that in, Social Security, anything like that, where money is coming in regularly. It has to be regularly to be considered income. If it's just a one-time thing, it's not going to be income. So like if you got, let's say, $1,000 birthday check or something from grandma, that you want to obviously note that, but that's not going to be really like regular. So we wouldn't really necessarily call that income. So then after you kind of come up with all that, after you come up with all your expenses and you kind of know where your money's going and you know how much you have coming in, you really want to start watching that, start tracking that. You want to maybe target some areas for improvement and just cut where you can. So, you know, and it can be fun. It doesn't have to be difficult, because remember, this is you taking control of your money. Like your money's not going to control you. You're in control, and you want to let your money work for you. So that's really what the budget is all about. And now, like we already kind of talked a little bit about the income, so I'm just going to put that up here on the screen. Again, you know, we have salaries to consider, Social Security, short-term, long-term, disability. If you have investments too, that's another thing. Like if you've pulled money out of an IRA or 401k or something, that's going to be considered a source of income. So you definitely want to note that down when you're writing everything down. I'm the type of person, I like to write everything down. So if that works for you, you can do that, or you can do an Excel sheet. There's also some really great budget apps out there, like Mint is a good one. It's free. You can sync all of your accounts to it. If you're already a Mazuma member, we have a great online budgeting app as well that's really helpful too. So that might be another way to kind of get all your expenses lined up, and then that way you kind of know what you have coming in, what's going out. Okay, so then there's this thing I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where you have your different bills. So you're going to have your fixed versus your flexible expenses. And just kind of depending on what that looks like for you, it might be different for everybody. But your fixed is going to be something like mortgage, like your rent, your utilities, your car payment, and a phone bill. Your flexible stuff's going to be more like your groceries, your clothes, any entertainment. So if you, you know, go out to the movies or something, or maybe you go mini golfing or something, that is going to be considered a flexible expense. So then we have some of these other expenses that I like to kind of bring up. And so what are some of those? So as you're sitting down and you're writing everything up and you're thinking, okay, I've got all my income, I've got all my bills. Maybe there's some other expenses that you didn't quite think of, like if you have a pet, if you have a cat, if you have a dog, are you factoring in things like vet bills, cat food, dog food? Those are going to be some other expenses that, you know, sometimes I know when I'm doing my budget, I don't always factor that in. So, you know, make sure that you're factoring things like that in, like pet care. Maybe it's child care. Maybe you've, you know, maybe you're using Uber a lot. That would be something that you want to kind of go back and look and see, okay, historically, I've used Uber this many times to go here and there. So I want to make sure that I have that noted. So just, you know, look at your past, you know, spending history to get an idea of what you're going to be doing in the future. If you're kind of like me and you don't really remember what you spend your money on, that will help you. So just kind of keeping a log of that, or looking over your bank statements to go, oh, I went to Taco Bell this many times, or I got Starbucks this many times, Uber this many times. So there's just other little expenses that, you know, come and go that we don't always consider. And so you do want to kind of factor that into some of your planning. So, okay. Now, this is kind of interesting. I always kind of like to talk to people a little bit about this. When you are looking at your expenses and your income, I know, like sometimes when I've done this, for instance, I realize that there's kind of an unwanted difference between the two. where I might have less income than I do expenses. I think most of us prefer that we have way more income than we do expenses, but it doesn't always work that way. So, try to think of some ways. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of bridge the gap between the two. One of the easiest ways that I have found is shopping around for car insurance. You want to shop around for that every 6 months. A lot of people don't know that. So if you've been paying $100 to Allstate the last 6 months and you've been a great driver, have you considered maybe contacting your insurance agent and seeing if you can get that lowered? Or, finding out if your phone bill, if you can pay a little less on that, if you're using kind of an expensive service, seeing if they'll work with you on that on a month to month. I was sharing with my other class this morning that my AT&T bill, for instance, was a little too high. I did not want to pay $75 a month. And so I called and I was like, is there any negotiation for this? Can we work on this a little bit? And they said, actually, we'll make that $60 a month and we'll speed up your internet. And it was just because I asked. So just don't be afraid to ask. Just, call some of these phone companies, call some of these places that your bills are going to, see if there's a way that they can work with you. Utility companies, even like Evergy and some of these other gas companies, you can set up where that amount is fixed, where it comes out like it'll be $50 a month or whatever. Or you can, work on paying part of a bill, one part of the month and then the rest of it another. I know I've done that sometimes. So that might be something to consider too. So there's a lot of different ways that you can lower your expenses. And a lot of it is just kind of thinking creatively, like, okay, I have this phone bill, I have this insurance, I have a vet that maybe charges a lot for care. Just think creatively about, okay, what can I cut here? Or how can I lower this cost? I know, like, for instance, when my rent went up this year, I looked at all of my bills and I was like, okay, which ones can I get lowered? And for sure, insurance was like the top. So that's usually a pretty easy one. Of course, another really easy way, if maybe expense lowering isn't necessarily something you can do, or maybe you've done it to the best of your ability, maybe it's about trying to increase your income. So it could be maybe doing a part-time job or doing some door dashing or whatever it is to try to maybe pump up your income a little bit. So that's another way that you can do that. Finding maybe a higher paying job if you're able to do that, or even asking for a raise at work if that's possible. If you feel like you're performing well, why not? The worst that can happen is they say no. So I guess if you have to leave with anything here from this presentation, is go ask. Like, just talk to people and ask. Just be like, can we work on this? You'd be surprised like what you can come up with on cutting costs. So just something to think about there. And then just to finish up before we go to questions, you want to understand your financial goals and work towards them. So whatever that might be. So if it's saving for a vacation, if it's, saving for college, or if it's paying down some debt, really try not to lose sight of that. It can be really, really easy in this day and age to lose sight of that because we get so distracted with all the things that we want and all that. And it can be so easy to get off the goals. So, keep those in mind. Maybe find somebody like a spouse or a friend or a family member that can hold you accountable. I know that helps me when I'm like, okay, like I'll call a friend or a family member and I'm like, I spent way too much, like take away my credit card, please. Just find somebody that can kind of help you understand your situation and keep you on track. That's the main thing. This is your chance to take back your power your finances are in your control. So I just want you to really remember that, write everything down, get a plan in place, and go from there. So I'm gonna end it there. And